And as always, we're especially blessed to have Edia here to open us in prayer.
Shall we stand to honor God? Oh, merciful God, our Father, we thank you, we honor you, and we bless you this night. You've brought us through many, many things. We want to thank you for every one of them, but if we stood here tonight to do that, we would be here all night and the next night too. We just want to tell you how much we appreciate everything that you've done for us over this whole week, for this whole day, up until this very moment. We even thank you for all the wonderful people that you have posted here in this place at CNM to help us, to advise us, and to be with us through one of the most difficult periods in our whole life. Thank you, Father. You've been so gracious, so wonderful. You've been so kind and so merciful. We just want to also thank you for our leadership here at CNM. We want to thank you for the servant that you're about to bring to us. Lord, our hearts are open, our minds are open. We are ready to learn. We're ready to take in blessing. We're always ready to take in some blessing from you through the person that you have allowed to be here for us this evening. Thank you for everything that's just about to happen, that's going to be a blessing to us on this night. In our Savior's name we thank you. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Edia. Well, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the old show, maybe not some of you folks younger. Welcome Back, Kotter. Tonight we have our own version of that, our own Dr. Owen, who we've been missing as he's been out with shoulder surgery, has bravely ventured the elements to get out here driving with his one hand. And so we thought we would start the evening back by welcoming Dr. Owen back. Where is he? There he is. How about a big warm welcome back to Dr. Owen. And Mal will MC the evening, and many of you know that Mal has this thing on LinkedIn. He's got a lot of open invitations. He is willing to accept your LinkedIn invitation, but he wants to get to know you personally. So any of you who want to get connected with Dr. Owen on LinkedIn, it's going to be an opportunity to meet him personally and let him know that you're going to send him a LinkedIn connection, and then remind him when you send it so he knows who you are. And, I'm going to start off welcoming back Dr. Owen, and I'm going to continue this flare of blue lays that we have there. I'm going to encourage anyone else who wants to come, welcome back Dr. Owen to CNM.
Thank you all. Oh my goodness.
Let him breathe.
Awesome. Thank you. Good to see everybody. Oh my goodness. What I will do is I will cherish these, but I won't wear them all at once.
Yeah. Where in the world is Mal?
I think Dr. Owen is feeling the love.
Wow. Thank you all. I will take these home.
We're glad you're back.
I'll get those, Mal. You just deal with the ones you got on. Woo!
Goodness. Only so I can breathe. All right. Thank you. Wow. So thank you all. The microphone is working. Talk about having a wonderful extended family. Let me tell you, those of you that are first timers here tonight just don't know what you got coming tonight. This is an amazing group. First off, thanks to all of you that sent out a LinkedIn email, or I feel so silly. Sent out an email to wish me good recovery wishes. I've got this wonderful card that some of you volunteers have signed, so thank you for that. But we really are a special group, and those of you that have the infamous, well, we'll do this a little reverse tonight. Those of you that have the infamous, I should say famous, red border around your name tag, it lets us know that you're a first-timer here, and just so you can experience how warm a welcome I get coming back as Welcome Back Cotter, how wonderful it is to be welcomed by the rest of the CNN family here. Would you please stand up if you're a first-timer, and let's give you a round of applause for being here tonight. Great. Thank you all for coming and for braving this crazy crowd, and this is not how we normally start every evening, but I'm still a little, my heart's like going pounding like crazy here. It's so wonderful to have all these layers around my neck. Okay, so one of the things we like to do is, and I guess we should, well, we'll get to Bo here in a minute. One of the things we like to do is always encourage intermediary successes. And an intermediary success when you're in the job hunt is what? To get interviewed. An interview.
Yes.
Thank you, Edia. Edia, you owe me a hug. I haven't gotten my hug yet. Okay, so those of you that have had an in-person interview over the last week, would you please stand up so we can give you a round of applause? So if you've had an in-person interview, please stand up. Great. So keep standing, keep standing. This is part of your exercise program, the CNM exercise program. All right, the next group that's going to join you, those of you that have had a phone interview over the last week, would you please stand up so we can give you a round of applause? Everybody did so good getting your in-person interview. We don't have that many phone interviews. All right, now here's a really next important group. Those of you that over the last week have connected with at least one other person, either through LinkedIn or going to a networking event or meeting them for coffee, whatever it might be, as long as you've met one other person over this past week you've connected with that you think is going to help you with your job search, would you please stand up so we can give you a round of applause? Wonderful. All right, yeah. So now the only group that probably is not standing right now, so we're going to add to your ranks. All the first-timers, would you please stand up? Okay, now the rest of you that are sitting down, what do we say to them? Get to work, right? Okay, all right. Have a seat, everybody. Okay, so one of the privileges that we need to do our announcement. So our wonderful Bo Ricks, who is our volunteer coordinator, so if you're interested in volunteering with CNM, which is how many of us got our wonderful start here, and I've been doing this for 4.5 years now, so it's been a little bit of a gig, so that's why I get a chance to have Welcome Back Cotter with all of these wonderful layers around my neck. They're actually trying to get rid of me. They're trying to suffocate me so the new one can come in and replace me. I'm going to have Bo come up. She has a mini lap that you're going to explain to us? I'm not quite sure, so I'll let Bo explain.
Good evening, everyone. So, I have been challenged with so many things in life. And one of the exciting things that I enjoyed and was challenged with was when I crossed over the international date line and the equator at the same time. I was on a ship, and it was a Greek ship, coming from Australia to the United States, well actually Mexico, then the US. And there's a big celebration when you cross the date line and the equator, celebrating King Neptune. I was 11 years old. I didn't know what this was. All I know is the pool was closed. So the next thing I saw were all these people running around in togas, spaghetti all over the place, thrown all over the place, food, fruit, everything. People thrown in the pool. I thought they were people on board ship, but it was the workers. So that's how I feel this celebration for myself. It is approximately 4 years ago today. Mal was up in front of the room. I don't think we were in here. I think we were in there. And he asked for a volunteer coordinator. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do it. I went and spoke with him, and sure enough, I did it. Here I am, I'm doing it. In any case, I didn't have a clue what I was doing or anything, but come to find out, I've been a volunteer coordinator for almost 13 years at the original Pancake House. So if I can do that, I can do it on a larger scale. All my executive assistant skills fit right into volunteer coordinator position here at CNM. So I thought it was rightfully so to have a mini victory lap because of my anniversary, working with CNM for 4 years. But I owe my deepest gratitude to 4 people. Keep in mind, this is my mini victory lap. The first 2 people are Edia and Will Yateman. They are my spiritual angels with hugs, love, and prayer. Then there's Mal. Mal's unique. Mal just has the brilliant ideas of what volunteer coordinators should be doing. And they're great. At first I was a bit turned off, but then I realized that's just Mal, and I'm gonna do them. They're great suggestions. But he also gave me the opportunity to build my confidence, and I'm still learning that. And then the number one, my brother, Bob. Bob gives me more confidence and self-esteem than I've ever had in my life. This man believes in me, trusts me, and it's such an honoring man, and gives me opportunities that I've never had. Mind you, I have learned one thing. Do not go and give a suggestion to Bob. Because you'll have to charge with it. But I've had fun these 4 years. I'm not going anywhere unless you want to get rid of me.
Nope.
And I'm here to stay.
All right.
And I'm very excited about it because I want to move on from this as a giving back my time to finding a position with benefits and compensation as a volunteer coordinator. Who said I couldn't have 2 jobs?
Amen.
So I'm going to have 2 jobs. One where I'm just absolutely happy and passionate and loving and meeting people that are in the same position as I am, and another one where I'm paid for it,
All right.
where I can be happy too.
And what you know.
So, I have come to my passions, and my passions are organizing, event planning, and coordinating things, and many more things. And that is all in a volunteer coordinator. And I really owe every one of you many thanks for putting up with me, for giving me laughs, for helping me out in various projects, and just coming up to me. I remember somebody came up to me and says, "Nobody leaves you alone here." I said, "Yeah, and I tried to disguise myself. I wore the red beret." Duh. Anyway, on that note, thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to a few more years, as far as I'm concerned, until I'm fired. And I want to leave you with this note. This is what I'm feeling right now and have since November. Thank you.
You got it?
Got it. All right. Are we, well, first off, oh, no, here we go. Yeah. It's coming up.
If you don't see the pictures, that's okay. Listen to the words.
whispering your name. I have seen your tears fall when I watch the rain. And how could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea. Gazing at a bird in flight, soaring through the air, lying down beneath the stars. I feel your presence there. I love to stand at ocean shore and feel the thundering breakers roar. Walk through golden fields of grain, beneath endless blue, horizons spread. Listening to a river run, watering the earth, fragrance of a rose in bloom, a newborn's cry at birth. How could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea. I like to stand at ocean shore and feel the thundering breakers roar, to walk through golden fields of rain, beneath endless blue, horizons spread.
Well, so just so we don't set the bar too high, those of you that are going to do a victory lap in the future, when you do land your next job, you don't have to bring a band with you. You don't necessarily have to sing any songs, but thank you both for the wonderful song to get us lifted up in spirit, to get through the rest of the night and to listen to our wonderful presenters. So let me introduce Sara Bridwell to you. Sara, we've known each other, we were just talking about like 4 years ago. Sara, both said an interesting point. She said, don't ever bring any suggestions to Bob because you never know where it's going to lead. And I think Sara and I both were probably the victims of coming up to Bob with some suggestions, and lo and behold, 4 years or 4.5 years later, we, in a loving and caring fashion, continue to volunteer here because of how much we think about all of you and the other volunteers and the mission that we have to help you find your next best gig so that you can really enjoy life and give back. And Sara is a consummate volunteer. She is really a senior HR professional, has been with PricewaterhouseCoopers previously, is that right? Got her start in recruiting. She'll tell you a little bit more about that. But Sara helped get started. Probably one of the most important things we always were concerned about is that we can do all of this resume prep, we can do all of these things about networking, but one of the most important things that we were always concerned about is how do you perform when you get into an interview? That is probably one of the most critical things you could possibly do in the process, because that's sort of do or die for you in terms of whether you're going to get a job or not. And that was one of the areas where we didn't have as much support as we felt we could have. And lo and behold, Sara decided that she would jump to the opportunity, right, Sara? Didn't you jump to the opportunity? Were you like excited about the opportunity?
In fairness, Mel, I'm not sure I had much of the decision in that. I really think it was divine intervention.
Yes. Well, I'm going to turn the floor over to Sara, and other than I'm going to pick up all of my lays, because this is a wonderful gift that all of you provided me. This is going to be very meaningful for me when I go home tonight and show my wife that I really was working tonight. I didn't go to like a Hawaiian luau party or something. But she'll at least know how wonderful the sentiment was for all of you, and thank you for this token of your love and affection. I'll turn over to Sara so you get something more productive out of the evening other than seeing me wear this superstar. So, on.
So, as Mel said, my name is Sara Bridwell, and for about the last 3.5 years, not the whole time that I've been at CNM, but for quite a while, I've had the privilege of co-leading the interview skills team, and I have a fabulous team that works with me. A bunch of them are here tonight. My co-chair, Martha Sullivan, you guys stand up. Bob Donnelly, who taught our workshop, Connie Bash, who also teaches, Frank Brady, Carrie Owen is also here, and Curtis Walter. And they are just a great team of people. We are here for you every Tuesday evening. We man, along with Brian Berkey, the interview skills table, and are happy to give you one-on-one assistance during this resource hour. Each month, we also do a workshop, which Bob and Connie ran tonight, where we try to deal in a little bit bigger fashion about your questions and things that we can assist you with in terms of being really productive. And then Bob is so kind to allow us to take the stage at least once a year. I'm going to try to get comfortable on this stool. You guys, I broke my toe. I don't normally sit down. Most of you know I walk all the time, but I don't want to trip and break the other one. That would be really bad. Okay, so a little bit about my story, right? Because I think it's important that we recognize that we are all a part of the family of God, and each of you is here. It is a divine appointment. You don't know what it is right now, how God is going to work this out, but I guarantee you that He's got a purpose for being here. And let me just briefly, I won't bore you, tell you how I got to CNM. Almost 4 years ago, I had made the decision that I was going to start a business. I was going to start an HR consulting firm. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. I didn't really know very many people who ran businesses, but I just got it in my head that this was something that I really, really wanted to do. I'd saved up the money for it. I went out to breakfast with a good girlfriend of mine, Alice Turner, who some of you may know. And Alice said, you know, if you're going to do this, you should come with me to this thing called Career Network Ministries. We have these resource tables that we do every Tuesday night at 6:30, and there's a guy who just started one on how to run a business, and you should come and talk to him. So some of you may know John Lombardozzi, who is an incredibly successful businessman, and he had one of these tables at the time, and it was how to start a business. So I went to John's table, and I was the only one there. And I had all these questions, right? And John had all these answers. And I'm writing furiously for the first hour. And everything he said, I felt like I was getting my own private MBA. And I came back the next week with Alice, you know. He spoke more, I wrote more. And it was literally the third week, as I'm writing furiously, God said, almost audibly, pick up your head and look around. These people are looking for jobs, and you're a recruiter. Yes, John has helped you for 3 hours, but I've got a bigger plan here. And what these people need to know is what it's like to be a recruiter, all right? So what I want to do for you tonight is to unpack a little bit about how do we think, right? We're not the enemy. We actually have the same goal that you have, and that's what we're going to walk through this evening. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So how many of y'all know, do you know if you're visual learners? How many of you know I'm a visual learner? Oh, thank God. Okay, so I'm a super visual learner and a visual communicator. Now, those of you that are auditory learners, raise your hands. Auditory learners, you got to ask lots of questions, okay? Because the visual learners, we're going to see this picture and we're going to go, oh, I get that. Okay, so auditory learners ask lots of questions, and let's talk about that. And for those of us that are kinesthetic, that's the rest of us, we need to touch it, feel it, smell it. Okay, everybody at your table, if you see a kinesthetic learner, like touch that person right now and make certain that you're going to help them work through all of this, okay? But know that it's so great that God has loaded this with visual learners, because you all are going to have to be the tour guides. And that's where I want to start, okay? So I really think, like I said, God uses every experience in your life productively for you in ways that you can't even begin to understand. So my very first job in high school, I was a tour guide at SeaWorld. And I spent 3 hours at a time walking people through the park and explaining to them how to get around the park and what the various animals did and all of that. This is somewhat the visual that I want to give to you guys. When you walk into an interview, you know everything about you. As tour guides, we had to memorize this massive book, like what's the gestation of a killer whale and how much do they eat, and you know all of these things about you. When the recruiter sits down with you, they know nothing about you. But you need to be prepared to guide them through what you want them, guide me, the recruiter, I can't do that. Guide the recruiter through what you want them to know about you, all right? And so tonight I'm going to give you a little bit of map on how to do that, okay? So, here you are here on this map, right? Every person in this room, okay, so let me take a step back. Anybody ever read anything by Peter Senge? He's a systems thinker, right? So Senge has this amazing hypothesis, he has a lot of them actually, that organizations actually work like living systems. Mm-hmm. And one of the examples that he gives is of a balloon, which is, in his mind, a living system. If you poke on one side of a balloon, it pooches out on the other, right? There's an action and a with, is this going to work? Maybe it won't. There you go, with a gap, okay? Now, that gap, depending on where you are in your life, can be a whole lot of different things. But when it comes to finding a job, right, those of us who are in transition, what's missing right now?
Money.
Money, what else? Eddie said employment. Oh, just yell it out. You don't have to raise that hand.
Fulfillment.
Fulfillment. What else are we missing?
Security.
Security. What else?
Benefits.
Benefits. What else? Somebody said something over here?
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem, right? Okay, so some of that stuff we got, or we thought we got, from our prior job, right? But depending on who you are and where you are in your life, you are going to put a different priority on some of those different things, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about tonight about really understanding that gap. I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes. I'm just giving you a brief overview right now, okay? But understand there's a gap. We've talked about everything that's in it. We're going to talk more about that, and I want you to very much understand it, and I'll show you more why in a second. Once you get that gap filled, Senge's balloon, you can push stuff out, right? What do you push out when you go to work?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. What else productively that you might get paid for? Productivity. What else? So, I'm sorry? Passion. What else? Acknowledgement. Creativity. You bring to the table a unique set of knowledge, skills, abilities, experience. You understand stuff. You can get things done within your own unique industry, right? And those two things play off each other. When that gap gets filled, you're able to push it out. When it's not filled, all of your creativity and stuff gets focused inwardly, which, hello, is not a terribly fun place to be, which is why Tuesday nights are so important, right? Because then we're with all these other people that are going through the same stuff that we're going through, okay? But that's where we are. Now, when you look at your new job, they have a gap. They need knowledge, skills, ability, experience, people who understand how to get particular things done. And when that gap gets filled, they can push out that new capability to serve their customers. So this is a cycle. Here you are, you bring your knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience to your new job, which God already knows what it is. We may not, but He does, right? They say, okay, here's our customer. We're going to deploy you to meet those needs. Now, that customer might be internal to the company. You might work in finance or accounts payable, or it might be external to the company. That customer box looks different for you depending on what your job is, right? But ultimately, that customer, once they get their need filled, pushes out money, which funds your total rewards, which then pays your salary and your benefits, etc. Right? So this system all comes together. Does this make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Good. Visual learners are totally up to speed. Kinesthetics, how you doing? Auditory? Any questions? You want to talk about it some more? Okay. I'll keep going. And on the next slides, right, we'll go. Okay. So now, recruiters come in several varieties. And this is where that tour guide thing comes in, right? So when I first started at CNM and somebody said recruiter, I got that could mean a whole bunch of different things. But one of the things I learned really early on is if you haven't been a recruiter, you don't necessarily know that recruiter means a bunch of different things. So let's talk about what the varieties of recruiters are. They come in varieties that are internal to a company. They're paid a full-time salary. So they're company recruiters. That's what I was when I worked for a Price Waterhouse. I actually came here to run college recruiting for the firm in this market. They assigned me to 9 schools. I had never lived or driven outside of the state of Florida. I was big in the SEC conference at Florida State. I'd never heard of 4 of the schools that they assigned me to, but yet I was a recruiter and was holding the fate of these college kids in hand. So all that to say, sometimes they deploy us as company recruiters in areas where we may not be really well prepared to do the job. And I'm telling you, I'm not unique. We're going to talk more about that. And if you run into a recruiter who's less than experienced or doesn't know necessarily everything that you think they should know about the job that you have spent a lot of time preparing to talk to them about, what is sometimes our natural reaction to that recruiter?
Frustration.
Exactly. We get frustrated and defensive. Okay. Now, how many of you have ever made best friends with someone that you started out being really frustrated and defensive with? Some of you, but how long did that take? A while. Okay? When you're talking to a recruiter, you got 3 to 20 minutes. All right? So any frustration or defensiveness that you bring to the table is not going to be even remotely productive. Instead, if you run into me, I'm a company recruiter, and I don't know as much about your field as you are, so wishing that I did, I am a gift to you. Because you can educate me about what you do and what you want to do and what the people in my company that do what you do. And then when I go back to talk to the hiring manager, I actually look like I have a brain in my head, right? So you are helping me. So I run into an inexperienced recruiter. What's my response going to be? Thank you, Father. Here's someone I can help. That person has a gap And I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities and experience to help it, to fill it. Okay? Now, you don't want to do that in a way that you're taking me to school, like, okay, little girl. But more, wow, you know, whenever I recruited this one guy who was a technical resource, and I really was way out of my league in this technical resource. And so I was asking him questions that I'd been asked to ask by the hiring manager, and I really candidly wasn't totally understanding his answers. And he paused and he said, you know, when I'm a hiring manager and I talk to people about this kind of job, I'm primarily looking for these 3 things. And he explained those 3 things to me. I was like, oh, thank you. And I went back, he works for that company, right? So help us out. We're human beings, and we are trying to do a job just like all of you, right? We're all trying to do way more things than we've got capacity to do, and being asked to do it and do it well and flawlessly. And there were probably 6 recruiters 3 weeks ago, and now there's 2. And so, you know what I mean? We're all scrambling. So I'm a gift if I don't know what I'm doing. And then there's HR staff members. The evil HR lady, or the catbird HR person, yeah, we know. HR people primarily go into human resources. Anybody know why HR people want to go into human resources? To make your life miserable? Is that the reason? To help people, right? They like people. They want to help you. Now, they don't want you to be a helpless victim, but they do want to help you. And so just remembering that can be extremely beneficial. A lot of times, if you're interviewing, recruiters will be part of recruiting teams. It's a job that they do on a part-time basis, or they'll have peers. How many of you have ever had an interview, a group interview, or you've gone in to see a bunch of different people? Okay. Worst job in the company is recruiting coordinator. Worst job, in my opinion. Because you know exactly what the hiring manager wants. You line up the 5 great people to talk to this amazing candidate that your recruiter has produced. Everyone is on board, and 5 minutes before the interview, 3 of them call and say they got called into a departmental meeting, and now you're stuck. Okay, you've got a candidate waiting in the lobby. He's supposed to talk, she's supposed to talk to 4 people, and 3 of your interview team is gone. 1 might be back in a period of time. So you got to get on the phone, and you have to call other people on your recruiting team and say, you know, John, I got a guy in the lobby, and he's interviewing for this job working for Brett. Can I bring you a job description and his resume, and can you fill in? And John says, yes, I can totally do that. You walk into John's office, and he's the guy who you're like, have you ever read my resume? Do you even know what job I'm looking for? And what's your reaction going to be to John? Not frustrated. Not frustrated. John has been a good guy. He has filled in. Now, I'm not suggesting that every interviewer that you're going to see inside a company is incompetent. That's not. But once you guys run into a competent interviewer, my assumption is you're going to be able to perform. Where I see you get tripped up is whenever you run into unexpected situations. And all I'm trying to do is give you a tour of the backstory of how this happens sometimes, okay? And then also hiring managers who sometimes know what they want and sometimes don't know what they want because the project changes and all of that. So there are many, many moving parts with this group of recruiters that's internal to the company. Any questions about that so far? Okay. The next group is external to a company. Some of these recruiters work for staff leasing or temporary agencies. You'll typically see jobs advertised on job boards. I'm looking for thus and such, and it's with Ronstadt or Kelly Services or FlexForce Professionals, right? There's also contingent search firms. These people get paid once you get a job. And there are probably multiple of these folks coming to the table for every opportunity. And then lastly, there are retained search firms where those folks get paid whether or not they place somebody in a job. These are big names. Heidrick and Struggles, right? There's a bunch of them out there. Korn Ferry. Those folks get paid a percentage of the salary of the person that they're going to place. The only folks in here that are interested in helping you develop your story so that they can present you most effectively to the candidate are likely the retained search firms. Everybody else expects you to know your own story and be able to sell that. Does that make sense to you? So sometimes we think a recruiter's gonna help me. They're not, for the most part. They're out to make a match, and if they're in the retained business or they're external to the company, they're out to make some money. Make sense? Okay, so regardless of who a recruiter is or where they work, they all have the same 3 questions. Every conversation they have with you, they're gonna ask you a whole bunch of different things, but they're really only asking you 3 things. Can you do this job? Can you be successful in this job? Because my reputation depends on your ability to be successful. If I, as a recruiter, refer you into a position and you fail, I take a black mark for that. So they want to know, can you be successful? And the third thing is, do you want this job, this particular job that I have to offer? Every question that a recruiter asks you is getting at one of these 3 issues. Anybody have questions about that so far? Okay. Can you do this job is all about the arrow that I have highlighted in red. This is what knowledge do you have, what skills do you have, what experience do you have, what abilities do you have, what have you been able to do productively in past jobs? Because I have a hole that I am trying to fill. That hole has responsibilities, it's got coworkers, it's got an existing hiring manager, it's got an existing infrastructure. And my job is to make the best possible match into that hole that I can. So every question that I ask or every activity that I engage in around, can you do it? Do you have the skills and abilities to do that? Is getting at this particular this hole. How well do your knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience, understanding, capabilities match with the job I'm trying to fill? Does that make sense? And when I am asking you these questions, which come in a whole bunch of different flavors, and we're going to talk about some of those in a minute, I have 2 priorities. In every conversation that you have as a candidate, and even as a new hire, the first priority is they are assessing you. Now, in some of these conversations, they're on the low side of assessing you, and in other of these conversations, it's virtually all about assessing you. When I'm not assessing you, I'm attempting to sell you on the opportunity. And I'm only going to sell you on the opportunity once I know you're a really good fit and that I've got the answers to those questions. Can you do this job? Can you be successful in this job? And do you want this opportunity? Okay? Most HR people, remember I said, go into the work because they want to help people. Most recruiters are actually salespeople. And salespeople are all about trying to figure out what's the pain point of the hiring manager, what's the pain point of the candidate, and how can I make a match there, all right? So the assessment happens in the front part, and then where the recruiter's really going to enjoy it is in the sell, closing you. My husband is a recruiter, he used to love to close. Closing the candidate, right, and selling you on the opportunity, and selling the hiring manager on you as an option. But I'm only going to be willing to invest that kind of capital once I'm pretty confident that you can do the job and be successful in it. And that first conversation where I'm trying to figure out, can you do this job, really low on selling. Okay, if I could have made this box extremely flat and you could have still read it, I would have done that. It's all about assessment, all right? And this assessment doesn't even often happen by a live person. Okay, the first thing that we get assessed by whenever we apply to a job electronically online on a job board is, you guys know this, is through the HRIS system, right? So the Human Resource Information System, the Applicant Tracking System, call it whatever you want to call it, okay? Taleo, all of those things are built to harvest for the recruiter the best possible match. And with today's technology, I mean, you guys use Google, you go in and you start to type, how do I get to, and all of a sudden it's auto-filling and trying to figure out what you want. Okay, that same technology is there as it's searching resumes and trying to bring those up, and it'll bring it up for the recruiter and the ones that are the best match, okay? Now, I want to pause here for a second because I think whenever we go into job search, sometimes we get to a place of saying, I will win if I can get a phone screen, or if I can get them to interview, or I want to interview just for the experience, or I want to get an offer, right? I just want to submit to you that that's not winning. Winning is knowing yourself really, really well. You need to know what you can do. You need to know what kind of a position you'll be successful in and what you need to be successful. And you also need to know what you want out of a job. And what you want is that very first gap that we talked about, right? So I want this much money, I want these kinds of benefits, I want this kind of work environment, it's important to me to have an office, it's important to me to work at home, I want to work at a place where I can take my dog to work, I want to work 5 minutes from my house. I don't care what's in that box. You need to know it really, really well though, so that you're prepared to match up what they're going to offer you with what you need. Sometimes when I talk about this, and Martha gives me a little bit of a hard time, I talk about it in terms of animals, right? So you need to know what kind of animal you are. And if you're a purple-spotted zebra, and I'm looking for a green hippopotamus, you might be able to pretend to be a green hippopotamus. But once you take the job, it's going to become apparent pretty quickly to me and everyone else that your neck is a little longer than we all expect. That you actually have spots and hooves, and you're not very good in the water, and you're not terribly... So it's not about getting the job. It's about knowing who you are and prayerfully seeking God's direction about who needs what it is that you bring to the table. Okay? Another piece of this, can you do this job? Again, it's a conversation you may not get to participate in. They're going to look at your resume. So many people advocate, and I agree with this to some extent, tailoring your resume to the job. But that doesn't mean creating your resume to the job, right? It means I have learned about an opportunity that I know I can do, where I know I can be successful, and it's with a company that offers things that would be meaningful to me, right? So I want to make certain that then I take my resume and I am telling that story to the best of my ability, right? So now let's go back to my tour guide example. When I was a tour guide and I had third graders, the first place I took them was to pet the stingrays, right? They loved that. Retired people, not so much. Okay, they wanted to go and stand respectfully and look at the dolphins and hear about the gestation period and blah, blah, blah. And all the third graders were, gestation, no, can I just go back to petting the stingrays, right? So know who you are, know who you're talking to, and help lead them into what you've already learned. When you read their job, you went, that's me. When they read your resume, you want them to go, oh, that's him, that's her. I want to talk to that person. So when I tailor my resume, it's to make certain that I'm speaking to the position that I know I can do really well. All right? The next place that you're going to get the can you do this job is a phone screen. Okay, so some of you have had phone screens this last week. How many of you have ever had a phone screen? Yeah, lots of us. Okay. How many of you have gotten a call from a recruiter and it really wasn't a good time for you? Yeah, okay, so that happens too. Tip, don't pick up a call from a person that you don't know and like let that go to voicemail and call that person back. Sometimes that may mean that you lose out on the opportunity, but if you have a choice between your dog barking and your child screaming at you and you're in the middle of a baseball game and saying hello and it being a recruiter versus not, choose the not. Let that go to voicemail, okay? Ideally, when you set up the opportunity to go into a phone screen, you're going to be by yourself in a quiet place, either in your office or in your house. I really advocate dressing for your phone screen, right? Don't do it in your fuzzy slippers and your pajamas. Put on the clothes that you would wear to talk to somebody, because believe it or not, you feel differently and you're going to project differently. Stand up, because your voice sounds different when you do that. And also talk to a mirror. Most of you have probably worked somewhere where you had a crackerjack executive assistant working for your CEO, and I would bet in about 50% of those cases, that woman, and she usually was a woman, had a mirror on her desk, and you thought to yourself, who needs to check their lipstick that many times a day, right? That's not what the mirror is there for. The mirror is there because that person knows that when you talk to a mirror, you have much more control over how you sound and what you're projecting, etc. So to the extent that you can do your phone screens talking to a mirror, you'll actually come across really well because there's an interaction there that's occurring. You're not just talking into dead space. You're talking to another face. Your voice sounds different and it makes a big difference. Also, another tip that Martha and I share with people sometimes is if you've got particular points that you want to make, you can put them on Post-it notes around the mirror so that you make sure you make them. Once you make them, you can throw them on the floor. Okay, so phone screens are important, and also increasingly testing, right? How many of you have done an electronic test, right? More and more this is happening. It's kind of the vogue thing. It remains to be seen how that's going to hold up longer term. I'm personally a big fan of a person being involved, but I don't think we can avoid this. Testing is going to be more and more. So can you do this job is all about assessing you, and it may be a fairly low interaction assessment. You may have very little control over that. What questions do you have about this? Auditory learners. Okay, good. Ask it.
Say for a Skype interview, would the tip about the mirror still apply, or is it different if there is a person in front of you on the screen that you're talking to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is about a Skype interview, and would the tip about the mirror still apply? No, the person that you're looking at is the person, and if you're looking at a mirror, they're going to be like, who are you looking at? I wouldn't do that. Okay, but that's a great question. So on a Skype interview, definitely dress for it, right? The standing up thing may be a little bit less practical, but if you're talking to a person face to face, again, that's going to make it a little bit easier. Great question. What else?
What's your thought about a phone interview where you expected the interview to just be with one person, and then they put you on hold and say, okay, we're going to have a panel interview, but they don't even tell you ahead of time. And so your reaction, like, you're kind of, you're like surprised, and then so how do you handle that? You're like, oh, sure, no problem.
Okay, so the question
But it's
is...
a different kind of feel because you're getting all these questions from various people, and you can't see anyone's face. So you can't really tell what's going on in the room. It's making hand signals for what they're doing.
So the question is, I had a phone interview, I was expecting you to be with one person, and then out of the blue they said, okay, hang on one second, I'm going to put you on a conference call basically, or a panel interview with a lot of different people. That is a really good sign. Because companies, when they take people out of productive work to interview you, they're already investing money in you, because they're investing opportunity cost, the time of their people in you. So when that happens, I'm going to be like, yes, isn't that great? Bring it on. Let me talk to you about why I am a great fit for this job. Let me talk to you about what I can do on this job. And let me talk to you about why I would really love to work on your team. Okay? We're going to structure that a little bit better as we walk through this. I'm going to give you an exercise where we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that's a really good sign. However, lots of times, as I suggested before, we have in our head exactly what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen when we pick up that phone. You don't know. You can't ever prepare for the recruiter. You can't ever prepare for the interview. You can't ever prepare for anything external to yourself. All you can prepare is you.
So how do you recover from a very bad person?
How do you recover from a very bad first question? I wouldn't be afraid to say, wow, I'm a little nervous, and I wish that I had answered that better. I'm hoping that the next one goes better. Remember, these are human beings, right? And so building empathy with them is not necessarily a bad thing to do. And also remember that part of what they're trying to think about is, can you be successful? A piece of that can you be successful is, can I manage you? I'm going to spend more time with you than I get to spend with my precious husband. So do I like you, right? So if we're able to, in a lovely, loving way, recover from something, it's, you know, self-deprecating. I'm not suggesting everybody, don't adopt my personality, be you, right? Be afraid to be you and to show who you are. We're not trying to hire automatrons, right? We're trying to hire people to do these jobs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes?
How do you tactfully say to somebody on the other end of the phone that you can't understand them?
How do you tactfully say to somebody on the other end of the phone that you can't understand them? So, can you not understand me because we have a really poor connection, perhaps? Or can you not understand me because you don't understand my accent? Language. Okay, so that's a really great question. And I personally, being from the South, don't struggle with that very much because everyone understands us, right? But I would say, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding you. Could you say that again? Or I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? And then, if you're just completely unable to answer, you could request to call the person back. Hopefully, it really is the connection rather than language, but it may just be hopeless. In which case, you just have to do your best to try to get through it. Another way to do it would be to practice active listening. I think I understood that you were asking me this, that, and the other thing, and do your best. Is that right? And let them say yes or no. And then if they give you another shot at it, that might help you. Is that at all helpful? So those of you that are struggling with language, like, anybody else have other ideas?
I was wondering are some recruiters outsourced from another country?
Yes. Are some recruiters outsourced from another country? Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking that's what happened, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
That could easily be. Remember, companies are looking to save money any way they can. And especially early on, if they may use a machine, they may use outsourced labor, they may use all different kinds of things. So that could easily be happening. Does anyone else have any other ideas about the language issue? Anyone have an accent where sometimes people struggle understanding you, and what do you want people to say to you when that's the case? Anybody? Yes? Oh, could you paraphrase, please? That's a good suggestion, right? And just giving yourself another shot at listening to it. Okay. Any other questions there? Yes?
Can you ask what kind of recruiter that they are, or where, you know, like...
No, that's not germane to the job, right? And you don't really necessarily care. So his question was, can you ask what kind of recruiter you are? That's not germane to the job, right? So when I'm a recruiter, oh gosh, it's not about me, it's all about you. So don't ask me that particular question. You don't know what my arrangement might be, and I could easily get offended, and you don't want to waste your precious real estate of time doing that. Yes?
I have follow-on questions to that, and I would submit that it might be relevant, and here's why. I think I've asked that of recruiters, I've asked that of recruiters before, and
I've asked that of recruiters before, and they've been okay answering that question. And the reason I ask it is, you know, you get to the point where they are going to negotiate salary on your behalf, and I wanted to feel comfortable asking them to do that.
Okay, so that's a great point.
And that's where what became relevant.
I agree. Once you're further down the road, right, asking those kinds of questions might be helpful if they haven't revealed it to you. Personally, when I'm operating a contingent situation, I say to people, I don't work for the company. When I work for the company, I say I work for the company. You may not have caught it on the front end, right? But I agree with you, if you're negotiating salary, understanding where that person is might be helpful, but in a phone screen, don't waste your time or real estate with that question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Any other questions about the, yes?
It was suggested to me once that, similar to your comment about not taking a phone call from an unknown number because you don't know what it might be.
But if you're in a quiet place, do it.
Well,
Yes.
that was the suggestion to me, is that if you're, even if you're in a quiet place and you get that phone call, never have that discussion immediately until you get a chance to do a little bit of homework.
Never have the salary discussion immediately?
No,
or-
no,
The phone screen.
that phone screen. If the recruiter calls and says, hey, I'm so-and-so from X, company X, about a position of Y, I have a couple of questions for you, put off that conversation.
Okay, so he's saying that even if you are in a quiet place, put off the conversation, you can do that. You may lose out on the job.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a recruiter, we've got an attention span of 30 seconds to 3 minutes, right? And if we're trying to fill a job and trying to gather candidates, we're roto-dialing, right? So if you don't want to talk to me, well then I'll just call the next person on my list. And I may never come back to you or return your phone call. I'm not necessarily not me personally, but recruiters in general, we have a lot to do. We're not necessarily going to get back to you. So I'm suggesting to you that if the dog is barking, if you're at a baseball game, and you're interviewing or expecting a phone screen, don't answer that phone. But if you're in a quiet place, answer it. And go ahead and engage in that conversation. And if you really know yourself, right? If you know what you can do, if you know where you want to fit, if you know what you want out of an opportunity, you're prepared to talk to me about that no matter what. I could guide a tour in the rain. I could guide it in a snowstorm. You can have that conversation no matter what. So it's all about being really, really prepared. It's less about the specific opportunity I'm offering and more about showcasing yourself. Does that make sense? Yes?
I was wondering about how to handle the situation where you're on the phone with an interviewer and they seem really stuck on making sure that you meet very certain qualifications. I'm an IT guy, I've got over a decade of experience. I'll typically get perhaps a young woman recruiter on the phone saying, have you worked with this application and that application? Well, there are hundreds and hundreds of applications. There's a very good chance I could work with the particular 4 that she's got on her checklist. And I get this feeling that, if I don't bend the truth and say yes, they're just going to pass me over. What I do is I say, I've worked, tell the truth. And then I say, I've worked with that particular.
Okay, so let me just pause you for a second. The question is, the recruiter's asking, have you worked with these 4 applications? I may or may not have worked with them, okay? If I've got questions that are that specific, my hiring manager says, don't bring me anybody that hasn't done Java, C++, SQL, whatever, right? So if you haven't done it, this isn't God's job for you. So be honest and candid.
Well, that's actually not what I'm talking about. Java, C++, those are languages. There's certain applications, there's a lot of applications out there, and a lot of them just look like Microsoft Word. You click here, you click there.
So again, this goes back to, so if it's not a specific language and you can help me understand that better, then help me understand it, right? So that particular thing is a lot like Microsoft Word, and I've got a ton of experience in it. So even though you haven't done it, you've explained to me that, yes, I can't remember, can you do the job, right? So that's the question she's asking. Can you do this job? And so you want to be able to answer that question. Does that make sense to everybody? Any other question? Yes? The electronic tests, what are they about? It depends. There's been some great articles done. If you just Google pre-applicant testing, it's been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. There's a lot of predictive testing that they're doing, predictive analytics, personality tests, etc. There's a whole bunch of software packages out there. It's kind of the thing these days. So just do a tiny bit of research and you'll see a little bit what I'm talking about. Any other questions? Yes?
In older days, just doing your job, by yourself was more important. Today, teaming is everything. So in the old days, or in the past, social dynamics were not so important. But what can you ask to kind of avoid? I mean, should you care whether or not you might be dropped into social dynamics hell? I mean, just getting the job is key. I mean, should you care about that? What can you ask about?
So the question is, should I care about being dropped into social dynamics hell? Yes, right? So that's all about what do I need out of a job and what's going to motivate me. And I think if we go to some of the next slides, we're going to get a little bit to that question. Is that fair? Okay, so I know this will move. Okay, so this is, can you be successful in this job, right? So this is about what do they need to serve their customers? What is the culture of their company that you're going to be deployed with? What kind of a teaming arrangement are you going to work in? What are your accountabilities going to be? What are your reporting relationships going to be, right? And in order to be successful in this particular red arrow, I need to know the answers to this gentleman's question. Am I best suited to be an individual contributor? Well, if the answer to that is yes, then I need to be looking for a job that's looking for an individual contributor. Am I best suited as a member of a team? Then I need to be looking for a job that's going to deploy me on a team. Am I best suited to manage people? Well, then give me someone to manage. If I don't want to roll my sleeves up, then don't look for jobs where rolling your sleeves up is a key competency, okay? Alternatively, if you want to roll your sleeves up and you don't like to manage people, don't take a job where you're going to have 3 direct reports. Know what it is that you're going to be really successful at. Know what kind of a manager you need, and that's going to help you frame your questions to the company. Because an interview early on, right in that box of can you do this job, you have very little opportunity to ask questions. As you move forward in the process and the assessment phase moves forward, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, you're going to have lots of opportunities to ask questions. And while they're asking you questions to figure out what can you push out, you need to be asking them questions all about what is their gap so that you understand that what you have to offer matches what they need, okay? But the first step is really knowing yourself. And one way to do this is to think about past jobs that you've had where you've loved going to work every day. So that's an exercise that I want you to think about for a second. Everybody think of a job that you absolutely loved. Everybody got one?
Yep.
Okay, what was the best thing about that job? Tell me.
Talking with people.
Talking with people.
Helping people.
Helping people.
Perks.
I'm sorry?
Perks.
Perks. What else? Somebody who's over.
Teaming with people.
Teaming. What else?
Meaningful.
Solving problems.
Meaningful.
Being creative. Solving problems. Working with people. What did you say back there? Working outdoors. Right? These are things. Look for that again. Right? If you know that you are highly motivated, that you're going to be successful by doing that, make certain that that's part of the gap that they have that you're going to be able to fill. Okay? So if you've got an outdoor job helping people where you can solve problems, boy, that's awesome. Okay? All right. When we're in this place, they're still assessing. Okay? They might have moved a little higher on the selling scale when they're talking to you about how you can be successful in this job. They're specifically going to be asking you some questions at this phase during the phone screen and during their in-person interactions. And when they're asking you these questions, they are going to come in the form of what we call behavioral interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The premise of a behavioral interview is that people usually do what they usually do. Okay? Said differently, past performance predicts future performance. People usually do what they usually do. So recruiters will often ask you a question that says, tell me about a time when, and they'll give you a scenario, and they want to know what you did, because presented with that or a similar scenario, it is highly likely that you will do the same thing. If you have not prepared at all for an interview, and you're an absolute perfect fit for this job, and your brother-in-law runs the company, you might get that opportunity. But absent that fact pattern, preparation is really important. Because answering these questions isn't necessarily intuitive. When I started as a college recruiter, they sent us to a class on behavioral interviewing, and what they said was, you are gathering stars. When you talk to people, I think that's my next slide, actually, wait, let me get over there. I'll come back to these. When you're asking people questions, you want to find out from them as quickly as you can what was the situation they were in. You want to understand so that you can crisply come back and tell the partner what was the task at hand that this guy had to do. Real important, what was the action that he or she took? And of most importance, what was the result? So if you know that the recruiter is mentally looking for what was the situation, what was the task at hand, what was the action, what was the result, the quicker you can give me that information, the more stories you have the opportunity to tell me. The more stories you can tell me, the better you can describe to me that you can do this job, that you can be successful, and that you want the opportunity that I have to offer. Now, I come to CNM pretty frequently, less frequently these days. I'm not able to come as often as I used to. But every time I'm here, we talk to people about writing their star stories. How many of you have been told, go write your star stories? How many of you have done it? And those of you who've done it, how many do you have? 8? How many should you have? 40. 40. 40 is a biblical number. Anybody ever heard that? 40? Yes. It's a biblical number, right? If you will write 40 star stories, your brain will begin to click into situation, task, action, result. 40 stories. Will you write 8? You've got 8 to tell me. What if I want to talk to you for longer than that and you're out of them? If you've written 40, we can talk about more things, right? And you can continue to productively sell me on that. Also, if you write 40, you can pick the best 7 or 8. If you only write 8, that's all you got. So what are you going to do tonight?
Write a star story.
Write a star story. If you wrote 1 star story for every day for 40 days? Yeah, 40 days. Okay, so star stories are really important. Let me just see if I can back up to where I was. Hang on a second. Okay, so phone screens, in-personal interaction, they're still assessing you, but also, as they're asking you these questions, they're starting to uncover what motivates you. What do you like? How do you work? Okay? I know who your hiring manager is going to be, so I'm going to ask you, who was the best boss you ever had? Now, when you as a candidate get that question, you're like, who's the best boss I ever had? What does that have to do with any? It has everything to do with everything. Because if I ask you who's the best boss you ever had and you describe my hiring manager, you just went way up on my list. I'm also going to ask you, who's the worst boss you've ever had? Because I've talked to people. I know the annoying things my hiring manager does. And if you describe my hiring manager as the worst boss you've ever had, you're not going to hear from me again. Is that your fault?
No.
No. It's just not a good match. Right? But if you've gone through that conversation in your own head about what did I love about this job? I loved this boss, and I loved him or her because they listened to me, blah, blah, blah. Conversely, what jobs did I really not like? Why did I not like it? Because I was micromanaged, I didn't have the opportunity to make decisions, I didn't feel like I could contribute, I wasn't asked my opinion. Like, know who you are. You can't know me before I walk in that room. But you better gosh darn know you, the whole book of you. Make sense? Yep. Okay, so they're still assessing you. Do you want this job? When they start getting to these questions about what do you need, how much money do you need to make, et cetera, they're still trying to match up what they know they offer, what they know they can pay. And you may have said some things in that last phase around that you answered some questions that made me go, oh my golly, that person wants a deferred compensation plan, blah, blah, blah. Well, I happen to have one of those. And when I get to the selling phase, I'm going to start to tell you about my deferred compensation plan. As soon as you hear me starting to tell you about great things about this job, the power has started to shift. Okay? As long as I am asking, I still have all the power. As soon as I start telling, okay, I've made it. I, the candidate, am a little bit past that. The power is starting to shift. Now, make no mistake, I, as the recruiter, am still assessing. I'm always going to be assessing. I'm assessing. But when I start to move to that sell phase, that's a really positive thing for us as candidates. I'm going to pause there. Does that make sense to you guys? Anybody have questions about that?
So you're saying after the recruiter phase, there's still more to go to, like personal interview or something?
Oh, yeah. And everything you go through, you're being assessed. Everything you go through, you're being assessed. And you'd be surprised about what goes on inside companies. If you've only had one job for many, many years, this may not be obvious to you, but okay, true story. I worked for a gentleman who was told in no uncertain terms that he needed to go outside the company and hire a really great resource from a certain target company. He went out and recruited the general counsel from this target company, really big deal, right, to come in. And we were so excited because this was going to meet the goals of the company, et cetera. We brought this guy in. It was going to be a tremendous investment on the part of the firm. He went to talk to the VP of Human Resources. And after that, I got a phone call from the VP of Human Resources, who was my boss's boss, and said, you got to go start over. We can't hire this guy. Why not? Well, he was rude to Susan. Susan was the VP's secretary, right? You are being assessed at every phase. Even when you feel that shifting, make no mistake, you are being assessed. Now, in that particular case, this gentleman probably was not a fit for that opportunity. He did not fit in that job because it was not cultural to be rude to Susan or anybody else. So we were very thankful that we figured that out. Does that make sense? Yeah. But you are being assessed at every phase. Okay? So, back to, do you want this job? When they're asking you questions about what you need to have given this some thought. Okay? A lot of times I recommend that people go through an exercise called the 3 E's, where you take 3 pieces of paper, and on top of the first one you write, what do I excel at? And then it's a brain dump. You just keep writing out, what do I excel at, what do I excel at, what do I excel at this, I excel at that, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm good at this other thing. And go back to it a couple days. What am I good at? 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 Whether or not you can make money at it, what am I good at? Okay. Another one is, what do I need to earn? I need to earn money, I need to earn benefits, I need to earn a certain amount of time, I need paid time off, I want to work part-time, I want Tuesday afternoons, I want to be able to go pick up the children. I don't care what you need to earn from the company. What do I need to earn? And the last thing is, what am I really interested in? And I have an E for that too, but I can't remember what it is. So it's, what am I excited about, I think, is what really, really interests me, whether or not I can make money at it. And the intersection of what am I interested in, what am I good at, and how much do I need to earn, I need to know the answers to all of those questions before I ever pick up the phone to talk to a recruiter. What do you want out of this job? Even when they are selling, they're still assessing you, okay? So when they're asking you, what do you need? It's going to be through in-person interactions, follow-up discussions, etc. There's still an assessment period going on. Any questions about that? Yes?
Sure, I was just making a point. Even once you get the job, you should assume they're assessing you until you've been there 3 months.
That's a great point, Brian. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Brian says you're always being assessed, right? That's a great point. I agree with that.
So should you tell them how much you want salary-wise? I mean, you kind of want a job, right? So, I mean, you don't want to overinflate what you want. It might be what you're making currently, but should you really tell them? Or
so the question is, should you tell somebody what you want salary-wise? I wouldn't lead with that. But yeah, if I ask you, tell me.
Okay.
Right? Because that's the only way that we're ever going to be able to figure out a match. Right?
But that might weed you out, though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if if I cannot pay what you need to make, am I a match?
No, I get you. But
Right?
But knowing that you could make less, let's say.
So if you know what you can make or what the range is that you can make, and you're comfortable talking about a range, do that.
Okay.
But recognize that as soon as you give me a range,
You're going to go on the low end.
I'm going to go on the low end because I am going to want to bring you in appropriately, give you space to grow, et cetera, et cetera. So if you name a range for me, make certain that it's a range that you are comfortable with and that you can live in. Also, do some research on salary ranges. There's a lot publicly available right now on salary.com. A lot of compensation people, and I'm one of them, would tell you that that data is not particularly reliable because it's self-reported. But I would say to you that the more data that they've got out there, the closer you're going to get. So if you go out there and they say, okay, this particular job pays between 115 and 135, and you're comfortable making in that range, and I ask you how much do you want to make, you can just totally say to me, you know, I was on salary.com this morning and it looks like that job pays about 115 to 135 in the market. Where are you? Where is your company? Right? So then it's less about you personally, which may feel less comfortable, but more about, I've done my research, I know what I'm doing, now let me ask you, where do you pay relative to the market? And if we start to have that interaction, and I'm in any way looking for someone who's analytical, well then you've just told me, can you do that job? Yeah. Can you be successful? Can you match my culture? Right? So make certain that you've done that. Any other questions there? Yes?
I forgot to ask you this before. Do recruiters hire interns?
Do recruiters hire interns? Sure. Yeah, I hired tons of them. I don't know why you're asking me that question, but yes, the answer is yes. Okay? So, let's talk about preparing yourself. Remember I said about this whole? I want you guys to know, and some of you have said this before, what does meaningful work look like to me? Does somebody tell me? What does meaningful work look like to you? There's no wrong answer. It's for you. What does meaningful work look like to you? Happiness. Okay.
Something
but
where you're making a difference.
Making a difference. And how do you individually make a difference?
I guess, having been in the military in the past, it's kind of a patriotic
Great.
thing for me. So doing something for the good of the country and etc.
Can you tell me about a time when you did something for the good of the country?
Yeah, lots of years.
What was the situation?
Well, probably the one I would point out is basically building, creating, pushing the state of the art, the technology, leading edge.
What was the technology?
Working with classified things.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. You've been really kind, okay? But did you hear me digging for a star?
Yeah.
What was the situation? What was the task?
Right.
Meanwhile, the clock is ticking, 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 ticking. If you have spent some time thinking about, this is a situation when I knew I was doing meaningful work. This was the task I had at hand. This was the action that I took. This was the result that I achieved. You're prepared to tell me one of the stories, and plus what you, that gets me one of my 40 on Sarah's list. Okay? Yes, thank you for your service. Absolutely, yes.
One of my best stories are classified, so how do I talk about what I can't talk about?
Yeah. So all my best star stories are classified. How do I talk about what I can't talk about? I don't personally have a clearance, right? So I am not in any position to begin to tell you that. One of the reasons that we have these tables, right, every Tuesdays from 6:30 to 7:30 is that we're here to help you one-on-one. And I've got a couple of guys that are on my team that have done some high-level government consulting, and I would bet they've either got clearances or they've known people with that, and they could probably help you through that. Okay? Frank Brady, Bob Donnelly, those are your targets. What other questions do you have? Okay. How much money do you need to make? We already covered that one. So talk to me about what you're looking for in a benefit plan. Anybody?
401.
A 401k? Do you want to match with that?
Yes,
Or?
yeah.
Yeah, and how much of a match are you looking for?
Double.
Double digits? You want at least 10%? Okay. So the 401k is probably not something that we're going to ask about, all right? But we do want to understand, is it there? So that whenever someone mentions it, we're prepared to check that off our list. If that's something really important to us, that we know that we want a 401k, then we want to be prepared to listen for that. What's work-life balance mean to you?
Are you taking work home?
Making it to your son's football games, right? What? Schedule. What else?
Not being in the office every night till 9 o'clock.
Not being in the office every night till 9 o'clock.
Are you
Again,
taking work home?
I'm sorry?
Are you taking work home?
Are you taking work home? Okay. So again, these are not questions probably that you're going to ask of the recruiter around, can I take my work home? But what does a typical work day look like? Those are questions you're going to ask for me. How many or how often do you find people leaving the office to go to a play for their children or to a game? Yes?
Can you throw in potential for teleworking?
Can you put in potential for teleworking? Sure. How many people in your office telecommute? Right? So again, prepare yourself to ask some questions to make certain that your needs get met. Right? So often we think of an interview situation as we're the product and they're the buyer. Right? The recruiter's the buyer, I'm the product. And I agree with that. You are the product. But at the point that we get ready to negotiate a sale, you are also buying. Because you're going to spend more time with me than you're going to spend with your precious husband. I've already decided that I'm willing to invest that time in you. Are you willing to invest that time in me? Am I the right fit for you? And by going through this discussion about what you need in your own head, you're going to be more prepared to assess that. Does that make sense? Okay.
What about the questions that they're really not allowed to ask? As in, when it comes to benefits, are we covering you, your husband, your spouse, your child? I mean, they're not allowed to ask some of that questions.
They are not allowed to make decisions based on questions that would be discriminatory. In most cases, good recruiters will not ask questions that they're not allowed to make decisions based on. Not all people that you run into in a recruiting situation are going to be good recruiters, okay? So we may get asked some questions with which we are uncomfortable. And it's your individual choice how you deal with that. I would submit to you that making me as the interviewer, regardless of my role, feel uncomfortable about having asked that question is probably not going to work in your favor as a candidate. Also, if I'm willing to ask you those questions, you get some clues about my culture as a company that may lead you to say, wow, I don't want to work at a place where they're going to ask me those kinds of questions, right? So I would be less concerned about, you can't ask me that. And I would be more evaluating, wow, do I want to work in a place where they're going to ask me those kinds of things? But if I could ask a question that's out of bounds, and I feel like it's probably just an honest person trying to engage. Lots of people say, do you have kids? Right? It's a very logical discussion point. We don't have children. So I say, no, we couldn't. And that pretty much ends it. And then we move forward. Question asked, question answered. And I don't make a big deal about that. Does that make sense? Yes?
I was on a Skype interview with a recruiter that was calling me from another country, and she asked one of the verboten questions, I think it was my age, and I sort of, and she followed it up before I could answer with, you know, and with a humorous remark, oh, I can ask you that because I'm not in the US and we're an international company. And I kind of paused, and I gave a humorous response to the question, saying, "Well, you can't ask a lady her age. You know, that's a question you never ask." And it was a woman interviewer, and she thought it was funny, it was humorous, and we got past it. She goes, "Well, I can probably figure it out from your resume." And I said, "Yeah, there's probably some clues in there," and I left it at that. Just, you know. But do you have any other insights in terms of how one might answer that question in a similar situation if it comes up again?
I think that you handled that really well. Again, we would hope that you're not getting asked about your age, and that's certainly not an ideal fact pattern. But as we've all discussed, we're not always going to find ourselves in ideal fact patterns. I would also say that redirecting is really effective. How many of y'all have ever watched those Sunday morning talk shows, Meet the Press, Face the Nation, whatever? Okay, so those guys go on Meet the Press or Face the Nation, and they've got about 8 or 10 sound bites, that no doubt they wrote out 40, but they have 8 or 10 sound bites that they want to get across. And regardless of what the interviewer asks, you hear those 8 or 10 sound bites. Okay? So what I'm suggesting to you is if you will spend some serious time getting prepared for this, and someone asks you, how old are you? You can say, oh my golly, I've been working for a while, and in my very first job, my best experience was blah, 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 and then you're able to redirect that. Do you see what I mean? So you are the guy on Face the Nation, and I want you to have those sound bites so that you're able to redirect it, because it's about telling your story. If someone is asking you those inappropriate questions, people, they don't know what to ask you. They've been told to talk to you for 30 minutes and they've got no idea. So tell me something, right? That real estate that you have in terms of time, you've got an opportunity to tell me your story. Use it to your advantage. And to the best of your ability, create it as a conversation, right? It's not about me. It's not about me as a recruiter, but talk to me. Yes?
Just as a follow-up to that, I'm just curious, what were they really trying to find out? Is there ever
how old you were?
Yeah, no, my question was, why would they care, and is there a situation where that would really be relevant?
Yeah, there are lots of situations where that would be relevant. The one that leaps most immediately to mind, keep in mind, I'm an HR person now, not a benefits person, but under PPACA, Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, sometimes called Obamacare, all health plans are individually rated according to the age of the participant, the age of their spouse, and their 3 oldest children, and it costs more to insure you. So if I'm paying 100% of your healthcare costs, and you're 50 and your spouse is 70, and you've got 3 26-year-old triplets, you're going to be really expensive to insure. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. For the first year, and then your kids drop off your plan. But anyway, so. But presumably, if you got 26-year-old triplets, there may be more behind. 20 and 18. Okay. So know everything about that. When you're thinking about what you bring to the table, this is where I want the majority of those star stories to go, right? What do I know how to do? What am I skilled at doing? What am I able to do? What have been my experiences? Okay? So, for a second, I want you to envision God's perfect job for you. The job that you just feel like you would be so thrilled to have. Can you think about that? Now think about, just for a minute, what's the key responsibility that that job is going to execute really regularly? What's the thing that job is going to do? Everybody got that? What is the best example you have of having done that thing? Everyone got that? It's not as easy, right? When you start to make it personal to you, thinking about the best example that you have of the thing that you want to do, that takes some work. Because then what I want you to do is write down the situation, the task, the action, the result, and be prepared to tell me that story. I can't tell you how many times in the last 3.5 years I've sat at that table and had someone come to me and say, I have an interview tomorrow morning at 9. Can you help me? Sure, right? That's always our answer. We'd be happy to help you. But beloved, if someone told you when you were working, you're going to go brief the CEO next Tuesday, how much time would you spend preparing for that briefing? All week, right?
Yep.
All week. Every waking moment you would spend preparing to go and brief that CEO. Why would you invest any less time in preparing for a conversation that's going to set you up for 2,080 working hours a year for the next several years of your life? It's going to take you 40 hours or more to write me 40-star stories. It's going to take you 20 hours or more to tell them to your friends and family and your children in ways that are meaningful and come across well. But if you will invest that time when you're in the pinch and someone says, how old are you? You're going to have more than, right? You're going to be prepared with your sound bites. Fair?
Fair.
Okay. So we already talked about the situation. What's the next one? Task. And next? Action. And what do all stars stand on? Results. Okay, great. So this last thing around assessing the company, your new job, you need to be thinking about what do they need. That's the question I was just asking you. What's the responsibility of your ideal position? And how do your knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience fill that hole? Also, how are they going to use your knowledge, skills, and abilities to serve your customers? Somebody over here said, you want to make a difference. Was that my same gentleman that I picked on before? I'm so sorry. Okay, but you made a difference to the end customer, right? Whether that was me here in the United States being able to sleep peacefully because you were out there protecting me, right? Whatever it is, you made a difference. Tell me that story. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Selling. When Martha does this, she does a fabulous job at it. I'm not even going to closely approximate it, right? But this is all about marketing. Okay, remember how I said we recruiters are salespeople, but you as human beings have to sell yourself too? When you start to think about selling, what I want you to begin to think about when you write those 40-star stories is that there are some categories of things that you want me to know. Remember how I said you want like 8 sound bites or 3 or 4 things that you want me to know? I want you to think about those in terms of contributions that you've made in the past that customers need, ways that you have added value to companies. So I personally have been a very successful recruiter. I took Pricewaterhouse from last place to first place in this market in less than 2 years, right? That was a contribution that my customer needed, okay? And I could tell you a bunch of stories about how I did that. I've built a company from zero with God's help to a wonderful experience for myself and my family now several years later. And I can tell you a bunch of stories about how I did that. Okay? I've managed a department and I've been able to develop talent. I don't care what your stories are, right? I want you to have buckets of contributions, sound bites that you are able to richly illustrate. And you're going to illustrate them by putting your star stories in those buckets. Then, when you walk into that interview, I want you to think about putting those buckets on the table, and as I and the interview team ask you questions, you're pulling out those stars, showing them off to me, talking about them, dropping them on the floor. But making certain that you've got enough to very effectively illustrate your points, so that I understand that you can do the job, that you can be successful in my company, and that you want this opportunity that I have to offer. So the last thing I'll say is that this isn't easy. Transition is really hard. Oh, it's getting emotional, because I do. I mean, the thing is that you are not alone. You weren't alone when you were working. You're not alone now. You won't be alone in that job. God's grace is sufficient for you. And His power is made perfect in our lack. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. That was awesome. I don't, we maybe have time, if there are one or two other questions, but we're about to wrap up. I think you got to ask lots of questions during the evening, but if anyone has one, raise it. Yes, sir.
It's not so much a question, but I think it lines up with especially the last part of what you were talking about. When I went through this transition the last time, I was able to get interviews rather frequently, but I was also at that stage, it was becoming evident with what I was applying for. They were winnowing out people based on the passion they had for the type of work that was being done. And that can often be the decider at that point. It's not always enough that you just know everything and you have this whole work plan out. If they cannot discern a palpable passion for the type of work that they are doing, they will say, not the person, and move along.
I agree with you. That's that question, do you want this job? Is it a good match for you?
And you can't fake passion either.
You can't fake passion. I agree with you. And when we're looking for that, do you want this opportunity? So thank you for making that point. Any other questions?
Is there a question? Did you raise your hand? I'm sorry, was that just a movement? It was a question. Fire away, I'm not going to make it.
It's just a question on something you said earlier. If you answered a question terribly, the first question, at the end of the interview, can you say, I've had some time to think.
Okay, so the question is, if you've answered a question terribly, can you try to recover from that? Yes, absolutely. You can always try to recover from it. Remember, it's an interaction. It's another human being. And we all, there's a thing inside of us. Somebody who's psychology can help me, but we want the underdog to win. Do you know what I mean? So like if you struggle a little bit and you acknowledge that, you get me on your side. Not just me, any human being. We want the underdog to win.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Sarah. That was awesome. We'll quickly close in prayer. A couple comments I'd just add to it is, it would be great someday if everyone had star stories and we kind of maybe had some copies of them in a CNM book that Sarah and her team had, so new people could come here and flip through and see 200 or 300 star stories.
Did you hear I just got tasked? I heard that.
If you did some of them, we had accumulation. That would be pretty cool. It might help some other people do them a little bit quicker. And the other thing, sometimes I'm talking to people and I'm trying to figure out how they're spending their time in their week when they're in transition. And we talk through some things, and there's never a slot that just says interview prep if they don't have an interview. And I tell people, you should have an interview prep time every week, whether you have an interview or not. Because everything Sarah said happens because you're prepared, and you cannot get prepared when you get that phone call. You have to be prepared yourself in advance of that, so when you get the phone call, you're working on preparing for the company, which is what she said, but blocking off that time on your schedule and each week and doing interview prep is worth it. It's worth it for all the reasons she said. So next week is our recruiter panel. A lot of what Sarah said is going to play into that. It's always one of our biggest attended events. We get 3 recruiters up here from different companies, and we get to kind of go through and ask them a bunch of questions, share some of their wisdom. And obviously all the great week one, we have a lot of great breakouts as well, and the tables all the time. Come take advantage of Sarah and her team and Martha and other people and ask them more questions about interviewing. So, Edie, I'll give it to you.
Thank you.
Shall we stand to honor God? Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Father, for the handmaiden you brought before us as a gift to us tonight. We appreciate and celebrate what you have just done through her. We thank you for what you have given us, the knowledge, the confidence, and everything that we have gleaned from this moment. Thank you so much. We give you praise, we give you honor, we give you glory, due only to you. You, out of everyone, know exactly which each of us needs at what particular time, and you're able to just touch that spot, touch it the right amount of pressure, and bring forth that which is the best and will show up the best. Work with us during this week with the knowledge that you've just given us. And we give you praise, we give you honor, and we give you glory. And we thank you for bringing our own Mal back to us.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. We really love you. Amen.
Amen.